I spoke with Emperor Palpatine last night, and he's assured me that the ISB will be taking the lead going forward.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Star Wars Andor Episode 7 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. And careful for spoilers from the episode if you haven't seen it yet. We'll just start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. A lot of you asking if Emperor Palpatine was going to cameo in this series because we're dealing so much with the Imperial Senate on Coruscant. They mentioned him so many times in this episode, so it would be weird if he doesn't cameo at some point during the series. Starting with the episode title, which was Announcement, which is a reference to Dedra's term for what she calls the heist that Andor and the rebels just pulled off stealing the payroll. She says the rebels were making an announcement, so to speak, about their intent to fight the Empire and form an official rebellion. But the actual opening scene was of Cyril Karn at his mother's house, getting another lecture about advancing himself in society inside the Empire. Getting ready for this interview with the Empire's Bureau of Standards. Thank you very much, Uncle Harlow. I wonder if we're ever going to meet Uncle Harlow because they reference him so much during all these Karn scenes with his mother. He learns about the rebels' heist on Aldhani, and then the gears are already turning in his head, and by the end of the episode, he still hasn't followed up on his pursuit of them, but I think the idea is that his job will just become so soul-crushing for him. Like, that's the whole idea. His new job in that sad-looking, soul-crushing cubicle, I think, is meant to drive him to pull another Ferrix, go rogue, and do what Dedra just did, like overreach, so to speak, but in pursuit of this rebellion. Bringing him back to the main plot, because right now he's on the fringes of the story, like he's not pursuing Andor actively, and I think the whole idea here is he's like a Les Mis Javert type of character who just won't give up. Like, something will clue him in to what's happening with the rebellion, and he'll link it to Andor and Ferrix, and he'll use that to renew his pursuit of what's going on. Also, the Bureau of Standards, where he goes to interview, kind of reminds me of the TVA inside the Loki series. Like, you become this cog in this giant machine. Obviously, in the Star Wars universe, we're talking about a cog in the giant machine that is the Empire, which crushes you down to nothingness. Metaphorically and literally. We see Dedra changing her white Imperial Security Bureau uniform. We haven't seen a whole lot of the Empire just casually changing their uniforms like this. The meeting that they're having is a big deal because we meet Colonel Yularen, who's a huge character from the canon. He was a big character on Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and some of the Grand Admiral Thrawn tie-in books. I believe Dave Filoni introduced him during the Clone Wars series for the first time. What ended up happening later, though, is that he was stationed on the first Death Star when Luke Skywalker destroyed it, so he died during that explosion. So he's not around during the time of The Mandalorian after Return of the Jedi. In the context of this meeting, he's meant to be Partagaz's supervisor, like he's one step above him in rank. And he makes all these references to the Empire closing its fist, which is a callback to Princess Leia's quote, talking to Tarkin, also in A New Hope, even though that's happening in the future of the timeline, like they'll pay it off during A New Hope later.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
A couple characters actually make references to things like this during the episode. Yularen's whole plan to increase taxation around the Empire, increase imperial measures, increase their authority is going to backfire, and it's only going to help the rebels' cause, like more of the galaxy will begin to support them. Also, you can make a prequels joke when he talks about increasing taxation and it being a callback to Phantom Menace with a huge plot point because the Trade Federation was increasing taxation of trade routes at the beginning of that movie. He's also the first person in the episode to mention Emperor Palpatine. There are several characters that reference Palpatine during the episode, saying that the Emperor has increased the authority of the ISB within the Empire's military, basically using the Senate to pass all this legislation to make it easier for them to have more authority. And they're using that to basically strip away people's freedoms, which is exactly what the Emperor did during the prequels. Like during Attack of the Clones, the Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, you kept seeing him pass this new legislation just to make it easier and easier for him to strip away democracy and turn the Republic into the Empire, into more of an autocracy. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, Padme were all good examples of people in the Senate who saw what he was doing and realized the whole time and fought against it, but most of the Senate were either already loyal to him, too lazy to care, or were fooled by him till it was too late. He says the first part of this new legislation the Emperor's passing is called the Public Order Sentencing Directive, and they talk about it being this big meeting that the Senate is having soon, which hasn't happened yet. Like Mon Mothma says, we're getting ready to have the meeting. So there'll be a bunch more scenes inside the actual Senate. Maybe that's where we'll get our Emperor Palpatine cameo scene. They also set up the end of the episode with Andor being arrested and sentenced to 6 years for just looking suspicious. Like, he didn't do anything, that's the whole joke. Like, I was just walking here looking around at the scenery trying to figure out what's happening. That's gonna get you 6 years in prison right there, buddy, just looking weird. All because of the aftermath of the rebels' heist and the increased measures that the Empire is taking. Some of you made the connection too. When the judge makes the joke about taking up with the Emperor, the whole 6 years reference is meant to be a reference to the Battle of Yavin, basically. Like they'll destroy the first Death Star and that will be them taking it up with the Emperor. It'll just take a couple years for them to pay that off. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why Dedra isn't happy about the Empire's reactionary measures is because she correctly guesses that it will backfire and the galaxy will begin to favor the rebellion even more. Like a lot of characters realize this. Even Luthen later says, I knew this would happen and I wanted it to happen because even though there'll be a lot of collateral damage, the Empire is going to crack down and start killing a lot of innocent people that will only drive the galaxy further towards the rebellion. It will only help our cause. It's also meant to show you how hardcore some of the rebels are. Like it wasn't like they won the galaxy back with a polite conversation with the Emperor. She also makes another direct reference to them being rebels. She's one of the first characters to actually use that term, rebels, to describe them. Later in the episode, when Marva makes the reference to rebellion, I believe she's also one of the first characters to mention that term too, to actually call it a rebellion. Back with Luthen, we get this huge Ahsoka Tano Easter egg too. Some of you may have realized this. So when he's listening on his comlink, there's this really robotic sounding voice. It's someone hiding their voice, but it's the way that they communicate between rebel cells. That's basically what Ahsoka did during the rebellion. She went under the codename Fulcrum and served as the point of communication between different rebel cells. So the voice that he's actually listening to on the comm here would be Ahsoka's voice, just relaying information from other rebel cells. I don't know if they have any kind of planned Ahsoka Tano cameo scene or anything like that, because most of the rebels didn't learn that she was actually the Fulcrum character till the events of Star Wars Rebels, which happens a little bit after this in the timeline. Also, connection to what was happening with the Yularen character. During Star Wars Rebels, when they get into that whole Ahsoka Fulcrum storyline, Yularen is also part of Star Wars Rebels in a big way. Mostly through the Thrawn character, like that's the big connection to Ahsoka. So him being a big character during this series just makes it sound like there's some Ahsoka stuff going on in the background too. Because we're in Luthen's shop and his shop is littered with Easter eggs from all the different Star Wars movies, series, and the canon, I think these blasters were featured during the original trilogy, but I can't remember exactly where they come from. If you think you know where they come from specifically, write them below in the comments. Then when Mon Mothma shows up to talk about the actual heist, we learn later that her driver, Cloris, really is a spy for the ISB. Like a lot of people wondered that, is he a plant? Yep, turns out he is. The funny thing about that is that we actually find out the reason why the ISB put a plant to spy on her is because of all of her charitable organizations, just the regular ones. Like, they don't know that she's part of the rebellion. They don't think that she's doing anything suspicious with that. They're just watching her because she just has regular charities. Like, how dare you try to help people? Even though later she develops this long-term plan for the rebellion, which I'll talk about when we get to that part of the episode. When she starts talking to Luthen, she mentions she's been using her own personal family funds up to this point to support the rebellion, but that's been a pittance compared to the 80 million credits that they just stole from the payroll. And the whole idea is they need this giant pile of money to really push the rebellion to coalesce into the formal rebellion that you think of when you think of the rebels from the original trilogy. Like up to this point, they've just been this disparate pocket of a bunch of different resistance cells, but with all this money, now they can coalesce into something much more organized. You also look around his shop, it seems like they've moved a lot of the Easter eggs around too. There are a couple of new ones that we didn't see in the previous episodes. I'm not sure where these giant clawed gauntlets are from, but they seem familiar. If you think you know, write below in the comments. Right in front of them is Plo Koon's mask from the prequels. He was killed during Order 66 in Revenge of the Sith. I've already talked about the Star Killer armor in the background. That hasn't really changed position, but the other real big Easter egg, probably the biggest one in this episode next to all the Palpatine and the Ahsoka stuff, is the Jedi Temple Guardian armor in the background. If you didn't watch Star Wars Rebels or Obi-Wan Kenobi, you didn't realize the Grand Inquisitor actually used to be one of the Temple Guardians at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant before he fell to the dark side, supported the Emperor, and became the Grand Inquisitor. I don't know if this is his armor specifically, it could be. She references Emperor Palpatine for the second time, saying that their big meeting where he's going to pass all this legislation is happening soon, like in a future episode. And then when Clea comments about whether or not Mon Mothma is going to be worth the trouble, obviously we know she is because she becomes one of the de facto leaders and public faces of the rebellion. It just seems like she needs that push to fully commit. Maybe it's going to wind up being the death of her family. You can post all your theories about that in the comments below. Like, what is going to cause her to fully commit to the rebellion? Then during Karn's actual interview at the Imperial Bureau of Standards, he tries to play his firing like the Empire's being too lax and use it as an example of what a dedicated worker he's going to be, but clearly his supervisor doesn't want to have anything to do with that. Like, you know what, let's just scrub some of this bad stuff off of your record, it'd probably do you some good. We get a literal little cameo from the mouse droid, first seen on the Death Star during A New Hope. His new job in fuel purity is literally just in checking on the purity of the fuel that's sold to the Empire that they use in all their ships, like in all the naval ships. And even though they do this throughout the entire episode all over the place on all these different planets, at the depot station, you notice the officer wearing a helmet that looks just like the helmets worn by rebel officers during A New Hope. You probably noticed a lot of costumes the characters are wearing that seem similar to costumes from the original trilogy. Clea winds up having this clandestine meeting with Velsartha, who's got this big glow-up since the big heist episode, who they basically task with finding and either killing Andor or bringing him into the rebellion. They imply kill, like you need to do something about him. But because of what happens to him during the episode, getting arrested, getting this 6-year sentence, obviously they'll use it as an opportunity to bring him formally into the rebellion. Like it's either us or go to prison for the next 6 years. Joke's on all of them because he's gonna die way before 6 years. Then the black droid here, when Dedra's trying to get these records, isn't K2SO. It's just meant to foreshadow the KX droids that we actually do see at the end of the episode. K2SO references, because if you notice, the droid is manning this archive that's very similar to the archive inside the Imperial facility that K2SO was helping Andor get into at the end of Rogue One. I don't know if we're actually going to get a real K2SO cameo scene, because obviously the droids at the end are just regular KX droids. It's not K2SO, because it's not Alan Tudyk doing the voice. Maybe during Season 2? Then at Mon Mothma's party, we meet Tay Kolma, who's just another powerful person from Chandrila, her home planet. She says that his family owns this giant bank of Kolma, so it sounds like he's super rich too, just like she is. It seems like they've been friends ever since they were very little kids. And they pay off the reference she made earlier to Luthen, saying that she knew someone that she wanted to bring in to the circle, so to speak, like this powerful person that she thought that could help them, using his banks to move all the rebels' money. She also mentions the Separatists from the prequels when she's talking to him too. She says that she fights and often fails to protect Separatist do-gooders. I think what that means is that during the prequels, for instance, she was opposed to the war with the Separatists because of the collateral damage it would cause the entire galaxy, so it's her referencing her anti-Palpatine stance. Because everything with the Clone Wars were his big thing, like he pushed for the actual Clone Wars to happen. And it was him just manipulating events in the galaxy to push through all this shady legislation to formally create the Empire. She also references Emperor Palpatine literally again for the third time when she says that she learned from his skill in deception hiding his true intentions. And I don't think that he's faking any of his hatred of the Empire too. I think he's just trying to let us know that, oh yeah, he's totally down with what she's talking about. Like, I will totally help you out. We get our Andor Bix reunion. They also confirmed that they used to be a thing a long time ago, like an on-again, off-again kind of relationship. Even though she explains to him that he needs to get off of Ferrix like he's enemy number one, all the citizens hate him now because the Empire's crackdown is because of what he did. We're not done with Ferrix, like they just gave Dedra control of Ferrix, so she's coming to Ferrix to start investigating what's going on with the rebels. So even though he takes off at the end of the episode, obviously he'll probably come back at some point. Also, him paying off all of his existing debts to the other people that he knew on the planet in the town is just a way of showing that he's not a total dirtbag, like he's not running out on all of his debts. Then we get a huge WTF flashback scene seeing how his father was killed by the clone troopers. And those are clone troopers, because remember, that was taking place closer to the events of the prequels before they completely transitioned to their regular stormtrooper armor. Basically what they explain is that his father was trying to stop some other dissidents, and the Empire confused him for one of the dissidents. So, oh, you're throwing rocks at us. Well, we're going to kill you now. Which is basically what happens to Andor, like he gets in trouble for literally not doing anything at all. Like he just happens to be near a lot of trouble that was happening and they just confuse him for one of the other dissidents. Getting hauled in just like your father, how ironic. His whole conversation with his mother about not running, embracing the idea of the rebellion, isn't referencing the same rebellion that Luthen is forming, it's just meant to reference the concept of standing up to the Empire. Like rebelling against their authority in general, not the actual formal rebellion. Also, when she says, what's happening here on this planet on Ferrix is happening everywhere in the galaxy, you can't run anywhere, it'll be the same everywhere you go, which is meant to foreshadow the end of the episode when that literally happens. Like he goes to a pleasure planet, some vacation planet, some distant place, and it still winds up happening to him. They reference his sister again. We haven't really followed up with the sister plot in a while. What will probably happen, early prediction, is that he will eventually find out what happened to her. And my other early WTF twist prediction will be that she'll also be part of the Empire. Like all the children here that were part of his tribe that got captured by the Empire were taken and inducted to the Empire. So she might be on the other side of this conflict, so to speak, and they might get into that during season 2. Like I think there'll be a big reveal towards the end of this season about what happened to the sister, and it will just push into their season 2 plot. Inside the other meeting, they mention Ord Mantell. They've used that planet a bunch of times in the Star Wars TV shows and movies. It's one of the capital planets in the Mid-Rim that the Empire is now using during this part of the timeline as a big naval shipyard. It was also one of the homes of the Black Sun Crime Syndicate during Shadows of the Empire, big Shadows of the Empire deep cut. They had the big standoff between Dedra and Blevin, and she winds up getting the upper hand because Partagaz likes that she's taking the initiative so much. The funny thing is that she's being rewarded for it, and Skarn kind of did the same thing and wound up getting the short end of the stick. During their little standoff here too, they also referenced that Partagaz is the person who came up with the way the Empire organizes the galaxy into different sectors. So just for reference, a sector contains many systems, like many systems of planets. Moffs are typically meant to be the governors of entire sectors. Grand Moffs, like Grand Moff Tarkin, were the governors of what they called over-sectors, which contained several sectors. At the height of the Empire, there were over 20 Moffs and just a couple Grand Moffs, so Grand Moff Tarkin wasn't the only Grand Moff. Then on the Namos vacation planet, Andor gets the payoff of Marvo's comment about the Empire cracking down everywhere. Like, you can't run, whatever's happening here is going to be happening wherever you go. And like I said, it's another reference to what happened to his father. Like, his father was mistakenly believed to be a dissident and hauled in for it, and the same thing happens to him. Like, the whole joke here is that he didn't even do anything. Like, he was just walking to the store, and the other criminals just happened to run by him. We also see the KX droids for the first time in the series, obviously just like K2SO. Different droid K2SO because it's voiced by Alan Tudyk. We'll see if we see him during Season 2. Also, it seems like there's been a small time jump too, because he's been going by a different name, Keith, and he's been hooking up with this girl here, and it seems like he's known her for a little while. She could be somebody they worked with before, or just some random girl that he met at the bar here. And then the whole joke about sentencing him to 6 years for literally doing nothing. Oh, this used to be a 6-month sentence, but some stuff happened and the Empire passed a bunch of new legislation. The Emperor just did something, so now it's 6 years. Like I said, that's a reference to the events of A New Hope and the destruction of the first Death Star. Like, yes, we will take it up with the Emperor. And I think what happens after this is that Vel Sartha will eventually find out where he is and help him escape, and that'll be his push to join the actual rebellion. Like, look, you either help us out or you go to prison for 6 years. And they end the episode with Skarn back in his sad little cubicle. Like I said, he's wasting away here. Eventually something will probably happen to clue him in on what's happening on Ferrix, what was happening with Andor, and he'll try to use his job to get back in on the actual action, on the actual hunt for Andor. But if you spotted any other Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. Like I said, so many Emperor Palpatine mentions in the episode. It just seems like they're setting up a cameo for him later in the series. My full Andor Episode 8 video will post next week after they release it, and big reminder too, next week they're also going to be releasing Star Wars Tales of the Jedi episodes. I'll probably do a giant episode video for all the episodes. While you wait for everything, everyone click here for my House of the Dragon Episode 10 video, and click here for my Mandalorian Season 3 trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.